So today we're going to be solving absolute value equations. And one of the big ideas that is new with absolute value equations is many students like to treat them like a set of parentheses, which in one sense is true, but these are parentheses with an extra power. These parentheses mean that when I solve for whatever's inside, I have two possible values which can equal the thing outside. We know the fact that if I have something like -7 or +7, are both going to equal the same thing of 7. So when we solve this in an equation format, that means to get the answer, we need to solve for two separate versions of the answer. And now, one way is to break this and take a positive and negative version of what's on the inside. Most often, we actually flip that process and take the positive and negative version of the outside. Whichever way you like better is the way that you can do. However, in this video, what we're going to show you is we're going to isolate the absolute value brackets, rewrite the absolute value brackets twice, take a positive version of the outside and a negative version of the outside, and get our two possible values for x. So let's see what that would look like in action. Now, with this set of absolute value brackets, it is already isolated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split. So split. I'm going to split it into a positive version. So 6x is a positive 42. And then I'm also going to get a 6x is a negative 42. Like I said, I split it into two versions of itself. And I'm going to solve each one. So I have the positive and the negative. When I take that, I'm going to divide each side by 6. We know that each side divided by 6 is going to net us a 7. So I get x equals 7. For the other part, when I divide by 6, I get x equals -7. So I know that if I plug in a positive 7 or a -7, I'll still get the value of 42. And one of the most important steps when solving absolute value equations is this is the first chance you're going to get to see what we call extraneous roots. And so I'm going to double check by plugging these in and say, okay, the absolute value of 6 times 7 is 42. That's the absolute value of 42. Yes, that value works. I'm also going to plug in the -7 and say 6 times the absolute value of -7 is 42. Absolute value of -42. And 42 is 42. And yes, that checks out. So both these roots work. Now, today we're not going to see really any of these, but in a future section, you're going to see values where you're going to get a positive and a negative version of the answer, or something that is a not true statement, which means that this is, in layman's terms, a false positive. It looks like it would work, but when we try it out, it doesn't. So let's try this one. Now, my absolute value bracket is not isolated in this case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 7, which is going to isolate my absolute value. Let's see, 7 goes into 56 8 times. Now that my absolute value brackets are isolated, I can split. Actually, I'm going to box these up just so it shows that, cool, I have a split, which means I'm going to say n is equal to a positive 8, and I'm going to say n is equal to a -8. Luckily, right here, there's no further work involved. I have my two answers. Now I just got to double check. So when I first check, I'm going to plug my positive value in and see what I get. So 7 times 8 is 56. The absolute value of 8 is 8, and 56 does equal 56. We know that answer works. We do the same thing with the negative answer. I say 7 times the absolute value of -8. The absolute value of -8 becomes positive, and 56 again equals 56. So that checks out. And we just want to get into a good habit of testing our values so that we know when we see an absolute value bracket, we're going to check to see, is it a false positive? So right here, our absolute value brackets are isolated, so I'm going to split. It's going to give me two different equations. Y minus 54 is 37, and y minus 54 is negative 37. If I solve both of these, I'm going to add 54, It's going to get rid of that. I'll have y equals 91. I'm going to try that out here in a moment. For my other answer, when I add 54, signs are opposite, so I'm going to subtract. 54 take away 7 is going to net me with a 47, minus 30 is going to net me a 17. Ooh, let's do this in black. Y equals 17. Perfect. And so let's test out our two possible answers. If I plug in 91 into this equation, 91 minus 54 is 37. See, 91 minus 50 is going to be 41. 41 minus 4 is going to net me 37. The absolute value of 37 is 37, which checks out. So now that's one answer. For my other answer, I'm going to plug in 17. 17 minus 54 is 37. 17 minus 54, so let's see, okay. 54 take away 10 is going to be 44. 44 take away 7 is going to be 37. The absolute value of negative 37 is going to be positive 37, which checks out. Both my answers work. And so now what I want you to try is I want you to try the same process on this next set. So go ahead, pause the video, try number 7, and see how well you do. Unpause when you're done. Okay, let's see how well you did. So what you should have first noticed is that your absolute value brackets are not isolated. So I need to get rid of this 44 before I can split it, which is going to cancel that one out. And I'm left with the absolute value of x is equal to, let's see, 110 minus 40 is going to net me 70. 70 minus 4 is going to net me at 66. And now that that's fully isolated, I'm going to split. And that's going to net me x equals 66 and x equals negative 66, which conveniently enough are already solved. So let's plug those in. I'll plug in my positive 66. Plus 44 is 110. The absolute value of 66 is 66. Let's see, 66 plus 4 is 70. 70 plus 40 is 110. Our first answer checks out. If I plug in negative 66, the absolute value of negative 66 is positive 66. 66 plus 4 is 70. 70 plus 40 is 110. That checks out, and so does my other answer. Awesome. And so far these have been 1 or 2 steps. Well, actually those have all been 1 step. So let's try a 2-stepper. This is a 2-step absolute value. First step is going to be to isolate the absolute value brackets by getting rid of this 13. It's going to get rid of that. And we have the absolute value of 7y is equal to, let's see, 83 minus 3 is 80. 80 minus 10 is 70. Cool. And so now that the brackets are isolated, we're going to split. That's going to give me 2 different equations. 7y is 70, and 7y is negative 70. And with both of those, what we're going to do is we're going to divide them by 7. That's going to net me on my first equation is y is equal to a positive 10. When I divide by 7 on my second equation, that's going to net me a y equals negative 10. And now that we have our 2 possible answers, I'm going to plug them in to check to see if they work with our original scenario. So let's go ahead and plug them in. So if I plug in a 10, 7 times 10 plus 13 is 83. 7 times 10 is 70, plus 13 is 83. Absolute value of 70 is 70. 70 plus 13 is 83. That checks out, and so does our first answer. When we plug in our second value of negative 10, let's see if that works. Now 7 times 10 is a negative 70. The absolute value of negative 70 is positive 70. 70 plus 13 is 83, which checks out, and so does our second answer. And so what I want you to try is I want you to pause the video. I want you to try number 11 and see how you do. Resume the video once you're finished. Okay, let's see how we did. So one of the first things I notice is that my absolute value brackets are part of a fraction, which means I need to get rid of that fraction. So I'm going to multiply everything by 8. And I know the fact that this 8 and that 8 are going to cancel out. I'm left with just absolute value of negative 4 plus n. This does not cancel out. So now 6 times 8 is going to be 48. Boom. Now that's isolated. Once I've isolated it, I'm going to split. My L and my I's got backwards there. Dyslexic much. When I split this, I get a negative 4 plus n is a positive 48. And then I'm going to take my inside and say negative 4 plus n is a negative 48. I'm going to solve both of these. So for my first one, I'm going to add 4. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'll have n equals 52. There's answer number 1. For my other one, I'm going to add 4. Because these signs are opposite, that's going to give me an n equals negative 44. That's my second answer. Let's try both of these out. First, I'm going to plug in my 52 and see what I get. So I get the absolute value of negative 4 plus 52 divided by 8 is 6. Negative 4 plus 52 is 48. Absolute value of 48 is 48. 48 divided by 8 is 6. So my first answer checks out. My second answer of negative 44, absolute value of negative 4 minus 44. Negative and a negative are just going to make a bigger negative. Absolute value of negative 48 is going to be positive 48. And again, 48 divided by 8 is 6. My second answer checks out. And there we go.